about where the market is. If you have 200 trees and they're all going to start coming on to fruit, you need to start thinking about where your market is. Are you going to be transporting your fruit? Are you going to have on-farm sales? Are you going to just sell to a brewery? So the netted fruit, which was all your guys' favorite, is very ripe and is that perfect ripe flavor and is great to sell immediately. It is ready to eat, ready to process. The hand-harvested fruit I picked and might have been a little less ripe than Mark would pick, and there's much more variation within hand-harvested fruit. So you can pick it a little underripe and store it for a good bit of time. And it's much easier to transport. But when you get it to the market then, you have to tell people you might need to wait a day or two. And do you want to have to explain that to every single person that you're talking to? Because part of Pawpaw selling is a PR campaign for Pawpaws. Yes, Mark?
So to follow up on that, Neil Peterson once asked, when is the right time to pick a pawpaw fruit? And it was almost a metaphysical answer. He said, it should fall into your hands. And that's basically what you're doing with these nets. If you collect every day, I would go to the nets in the morning usually. And if you've ever been to an egg farm where the eggs just rolling down the screen, and you just walk along the aisles and pick the eggs. It's like picking eggs in an egg farm. It's much nicer than feeling each fruit individually and wondering if now's the time it will fall into my hand.
Yeah.
But it fell into the net overnight, and it's just boom.
And we're trying to use that excision layer, that hormonal trigger that says this fruit is ripe and is going to start degrading now, because that is the perfect time to pick that fruit for our advantage. Because pawpaws don't have many advantages. They're not very domesticated. They've not been around for very long, and not as many people know about them. But if we can utilize that excision layer and say we can harvest now, you need a little infrastructure, but it's worth it. Do you have a question?
Yes. When like transporting pawpaws to even to different states and stuff, would it go bad in a truck or a semi truck if you're shipping bulk?
So shipping bulk, I have transported 400 pounds of pawpaws in a Suburban, and if you're not doing it in a refrigerated van, it's going to be hard and you're going to get bruises. So I do know of one grower who ships his pawpaw fruit. I think he's insane, but he does it. So packaging them individually, they have individual fruit nets where you can put them on the fruit, and that's probably something that would have to happen because they bruise so easily. And then the trucking companies or anyone else or a big grocer would want them at the underripe stage before they've ripened. Mark can tell you that it's hard to pick an underripe fruit all the time. You can't exactly know if it's going to ripen all 100%. So we need to get a little bit better. I know growers who have lots of experience who can tell that, but it's also still hard. So for major stuff, it's still a far ways away. There are people who routinely drive smaller loads to another state, but you have to put them over ice, pack them really closely. They need to be the right shape of fruit. You have to be very fastidious in all of these different things. Yes?
Oh, how long does it take? I mean, from the beginning of ripening on a pawpaw tree until that tree's done. I'm sure there's difference in varieties, right?
There are differences in cultivar. And so in the flower itself, within a cluster, they don't all ripen at once.
Right.
One will ripen, another will ripen, and sometimes if one has ripened in a cluster, the unripened one will fall off. And that's always sad when that happens, because you're like, well, there's that nice big one that's just fallen off because you were ripe. It doesn't seem to have the same kind of ripening sequence as an apple or anything else that we have. Very, like, analogous, because it will start with one on a tree that's way ahead of time, and then it will go from up to a month, dependent. So ripening is focused on growing degree days. So those are how much heat hours you get from the time it's pollinated to when it actually ripens. So it's just a physiological measurement. And within that fruit, it just has to take that time. So you have so many factors here, but I think the biggest factor, which Pomper has published on this, is from when you pollinate the tree, when that tree is pollinated, to when it will become to fruit. That is a set time, and it's different for different cultivars. I would also say it's probably, you have to add water retention in there. So if it's, last year we had a drought, so those fruit came on a little earlier. So if the trees are under stress, if there's not enough water, if there was a lot more sun, if there was damage to the trees, those all the things that could affect that. But you're looking at, if you're getting pollinated in the end of May, you're going to get fruit ripening at mid to late August. And that's about the general period. So if you have pollen stored in the freezer from last year, you can pollinate your first flowers with that pollen and extend your season, if you're looking for season extension, if that is what you might be after. The cultivars and their periodicity of like late, early, and mid-season aren't really well documented because it changes so much from place to place. It changes from up here in Worcester down to Columbus, down to Kentucky, on which ones come in at different times.
So you're talking probably a 2 or 3 week period for bloom?
Yes, but this season, we got it extended by like 3 weeks, which is a blessing and a curse if you're trying to do a bunch of experiments. Because then you're kind of like, oh, and it frosts, and all my flowers are killed. And it frosts again, and all my flowers are killed, but the trees keep on, they have a lot of flowers, which is good. In apple trees, you need about a 5% take on your flowers to get a full crop. So even if your pawpaw tree is sending off 1,000 flowers, you only need 10 or 15 of them to pollinate to get a large amount of fruit off that tree. Because you remember, each cluster probably has 3 or 4 fruit in it, at least, if you're in a full sun setting. Other questions? Yes?
Well, talking about shipping, you used food grade wax for cultivar. Has anybody experimented on taking the fruit and waxing it for shipping? Because the wax would protect it. They wax apples to make sure that they don't dehydrate. So but the food grade waxes that you're talking about are a little heavier.
Yes.
So would they protect the fruit and then slow down the oxidation and the ripening process for shipping?
So we have not, I had many grand ideas of trying to do things like that, and I have to say, no, I am done with taking data, and I just had to like focus in, and I'm stop doing things. I've got to say no. But it is a very good idea. It's one that I have thought about. And I had a whole experiment planned out in my head of how we were going to use the shaker table and waxing the fruit and not waxing the fruit, and it was great. But we didn't do it. But it is a good idea. And it's wax from Field and Forest Mushroom Company. They use it to put over the plugs. It's just the cheese wax, like you'd find on a Baby Bell. And so I think it would insulate some of those pressures in shipping. Now, slowing the ripening and the oxidation, there is an argument to be made that the wax would actually increase it because you're trapping the ethylene inside the fruit itself and not letting it escape. But it might be permeable enough to let the ethylene out. We never tested that. So it would have to be tested. There was a small increase in storability that I saw, but it was not enough of an increase to say, oh yes, this is definitely a pattern. It was just a small observation.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something to look into in the future, and I hope there are many more graduate students and growers and hobbyists who get to look into these things, and doing small experiments yourself on a scale is easy to, it's not the most difficult thing. You just have to be exacting and fastidious in taking the data. And that's, Lauren does science all the time on how you plant trees and you test things and you experiment. We do it all every day in all our practices. So if you do something, I would love to hear about it next time I see you. Anybody else? Okay. Any other general questions?
Just the term hand harvested, the meaning you're going like this and you're just kind of tickling it?
Oh, no, you don't tickle.
What is hand harvest?
Yeah.
Just
Okay. No, not tickling. So
it falls off or no?
you squeeze it like a peach. So these fruit range in size from like golf ball size to like a small 2 tennis balls put together. Some of them are pretty big. So you have to go up to each fruit, hold it, and squeeze it. And you don't want to do it too hard because you can pull it off the tree by accident, and it can fall. You don't want to bruise it. So you have to be gentle if you're at the market touching peaches to see which ones are ripe, or an avocado. It's a little more, maybe a little more like an avocado, because you've got it's not as much of a texture on the skin, but you're looking for that softness. Okay. So each individual fruit. The problem with hand harvesting is when you're going up to a tree with 50 to 100 fruit on it, you have no visual indication. Some cultivars have a slight visual indication. PA Golden, which has never bore fruit very well in my estimation of I've seen, but it has a yellow change in the color when it's ready. And then there's another cultivar out of Peace Tree Nursery that they said, it's not Moon Glow, but it's something like that it's supposed to have a yellow color change when it ripens. So there is some genetics to have that ripening color change, which would be great, because if not, you have to go up to every single fruit and touch it. And
so
that
if
takes
it's soft, then you can pull.
Then you can pull it off. And if it's soft, you shouldn't really pull it off. You should wait until it falls into your hand.
Okay.
If you're looking for ready to eat pawpaws.
Could you twist and pull? Like a...
Yeah, you can twist and pull, but so that softness, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but most growers go out and touch everything, and the first day that it's slightly softened, you don't want to pull it off the tree right yet, because it still might take. There is not, going back to your question on how long is this ripening period, some trees, the first day it's softening, it will take 4 or 5 days for that fruit to get to the point where it's falling off. And some it takes more than 5 days. It takes up to 10. And some it's like bing bang boom, the next day it's ready to fall into your hand. So you're taking a gamble if you are pulling it off the tree early, if it's going to ripen all the way. Because you can't pick underripe fruit. You can't pick something that's hard still and get a perfect, you can get about a 50%, like around 50% success rate of them ripening on the counter, but it's not going to be anywhere higher than that. We've never been able to make it higher than that. We've used chemicals. We've used lots of things. We did this and KSU did this, and no one's been able to figure it out. We're kind of confused because it doesn't behave like all other climacteric fruit. which you can add ethylene to and they start to ripen. So it's slightly annoying, but also is really interesting and exciting. Did you get your question answered? Yes. Okay. Anybody else have any further questions? Anything questions about fruit in general, marketing? Because we're gonna go. Oh yes.
Okay, so like a microbrewery or something. I've heard, actually I heard from Ron Powell, he said, well, you want to do the least amount of work, send it to the brewery. Is that true? You know?
So one of the problems right now is that there's not a lot of commercial kitchens out there that you can handle pawpaws in, because to technically handle them, they're not a low acid. You can't really make anything low acid with them. You have to make things with cream, or the pulp itself needs to be in a commercial kitchen to make. That's what we did in here. We were in a commercial kitchen down in Columbus, because that's the facility you need to technically process it. Breweries have their own commercial kitchens, so that's why it's easier, because you bring the fruit, bulk fruit, to them and they process it. They also don't care about bruises and imperfections. If you're going to sell what's the selection that Greg takes? What do we call it? Greg grade? Like
Greg grade.
Greg grade. AAA. If you're taking your AAA fruit to somebody, then it takes a lot of work to hand harvest those fruit, put them into packaging, make sure that each one is nice and perfect. Unlike this, where you can go through the orchard, put it in a fridge, into big totes. There's very nice wine grape totes that you can buy on Uline or something like that, and you can put all of the extra fruit in there, put them in a cooler, pull them out, bring them to a brewery, and they'll say, okay, I'll give you X dollars per pound. And then you don't have to do any of the work. Now, if you're using your fancy grade, AAA grade fruit, you're going to still have your crappy fruit. So this is where the marketing comes in. It's why planting an orchard, a large orchard, you should start small and like keep on planting every year, because then you're going to increase your market each year as those trees come on. Because if you start out with 20 trees that are all producing, you're going to get a lot of fruit off of that. But if you have like our OSU orchard that if we put in Columbus, we got 400 to 500 pounds, like between 300 and 500 pounds off of that orchard last year. And that was a lot to have all happen 1 year.
Yeah.
It was not particularly the easiest thing to that just magically have 500 pounds of fruit to deal with. So you don't want to do that, because then you're going to be trying to give the things away. You want to have a slow kind of burn to bring those things up. You always want to be thinking about your market. You're going to have fancy grade, and you're going to have seconds. Apple growers have really done well at this. They grade on farm, and they sell their fancies, and then they sell their A's and their B's, and they have cider out. So you kind of want to pattern that off of that. So you're going to, selling to a brewery is a great idea, but you have to have, still, those breweries want to know how much poundage you're going to have at the beginning of the season so that they can plan. So it's an interesting game to play, and you have to have some sort of yield estimate to give them, like, okay, I'm going to have 50 pounds for you. And it's not always easy. If we had, like last year we had a drought, and those fruit were a lot smaller than expected, then you don't have as much pounds. So I hope that answered your question, but okay.
Yeah. I couldn't figure out why, when you said that the process. Otherwise, we would have to do it for yourself. Get one of those machines or something.
Yeah, you can get one of those machines. There are commercial kitchens throughout the state that you can rent out at the time. So for a weekend or something like that. And then you can use those facilities. what are they called? But it is a question of if you want to do fresh or if you want to do pulp. After you get the pulp, you can sell that online. You can sell it in a store, in a local store that sells local goods. It just depends. It's a much more stable product than the fresh fruit, but it's a lot more effort and energy and time investment into that. So it's a give and take.
I don't want to dominate, but I have one more question.
Oh, that's fine.
Ice cream, if there's a couple commercial dairies that might introduce that seasonally or something like that, they're going to want to pulp, I would assume.
Yes.
Has anyone done that?
So
What was the question?
has anyone done pulp for ice cream shops? I think most of the ice cream shops that I've heard of have done the pulp in-house. I know that there's one down in Columbus, I can't remember the name of it, that does a seasonally Pawpaw ice cream every year, and I think they do it in-house. They don't buy the pulp. But there is probably a market for that. The things that you have to remember about pulp, it needs to be sterile. It probably needs to be third-party tested to be sterile. You need to decrease the yeasts and the mold in there are very important, but the E. coli also, making sure that there's no E. coli in there. So sterility is one of the most important things, and then also a consistent packing volume would be also very important. ODA, they have a consumer protection lab, so you can send samples there. They will test them for E. coli, mold, yeast. It's not that badly priced, so that could be a way to do that. Yes?
My experience with approaching ice cream manufacturers has been that there have been pretty well publicized problems with ice cream contamination with the news, listeria, E. coli, and the ice cream manufacturers are very wary right now about buying any fruit, even if they want to process it in-house. They'll say, we only buy frozen fruit that's processed by these big strawberry farms where everything is controlled, it's tested, and so I just don't think there's much of a market here for us, unless you really jump through a lot of hoops.
So that's knowing your market. So it's a lot of market research and a lot of phone calls. If you have an in at a local dairy and you're like, hey, I can go to a commercial kitchen, I can show you the test results that my batch is clean, they might be willing to take a chance on you. But you would have to make that contract ahead of time. And it's a lot of legwork. Yes, Lauren, I'm going to get back to you.
I'm going to say, Sarah, Mabel and I have looked at this quite a bit, and thinking it through. And to be quite honest, I think as an individual, you're going to be hard pressed to be able to get to that point. That's my take on it. In other words, to have the standardized processing capabilities, once those techniques are fully worked out on how to do that, you still got all those other issues, and I agree with Mark that that whole aspect of picking on ice cream, but there's lots of other uses for pulp beyond ice cream. But to be quite honest, I think this is one of these things, and I just throw it out there, is that this is a project that is well worth that working together between university and perhaps a Pawpaw grower cooperative type of venture, where you can have the resources, because it's going to take a fair amount of investment on it. And as an individual small orchard, I don't know that can be done. I just know logistically and monetarily.
It also is the question of how much pulp you have, how much fruit you have.
And most of these folks, most of the you want to approach somebody, say like Smucker, they want consistency, they want this stuff available year round. And
they want at least 10,000 pounds.
In quantity. And how do you do that? We don't have the growers.
Yeah, and so the 2022 U.S. Farm Survey came out, and they have Pawpaw in it. There's like there's 1,000 or so acres of Pawpaw planted now, and it's in the USDA survey. It's really great. I'm very happy about it. But to get to that 10,000 mark, we need a lot more acres.
A lot more fruit folks should be really, whoever really interested in this on some kind of a reasonable scale is to start thinking about doing this on a cooperative type of basis.
Yeah, because this machine now is like $4 or $5 grand, and putting that outlay at one time for a machine that you're going to use for probably a week, when a co-op could split that cost across many years, across many growers, it would make more sense. Yes.
What are we talking dollars per pound here? What's the rate for this?
So the rate currently is, for pulp, is about $20 per pound. So to break even on that, can somebody do the math on $20 per pound? Yes, you. I was gonna make you do the math. Thank you. But you also have to consider that even with this machine, the top percentage we're getting is 54% per pound of fruit. And that's with blanching. So with blanching, you get the highest yield of fruit. But then you get that skin, a little bit of underneath the skin area, and you have to, well, the seeds come out, the seeds are, yes, how much?
So with the, you need 250 pounds of pulp to break even if that costs 5,000.
Yeah.
And at your 55% ratio, you need 454.5 pounds of fruit.
And Mark, how many pounds of fruit, how many pounds of pawpaw do you get off your orchard?
That's a tough,
Is it around 1,000?
I'd say 1,500, 2,000 pounds maybe, but different grades.
Yeah, it's not all high grade, it's not all low.
I ended up the last couple of years going a lot to the woods and did. I was so tired of pulping and selling, and the stuff wasn't the best. I went to the woods.
Yeah. It's a good place for extra pawpaws, throw it in the woods, and then you'll grow more pawpaw trees. So we're talking about 500 pounds. You need a full-size orchard to break even on that, but that's the reason. But you're gonna have to sell the 250 pounds of pulp at $20 a pound, and the amount of effort and time and labor you're gonna put into that is a lot of time. Peel it, and also if you're hiring labor, some people do not know how to peel the fruit. You encounter these people that you look at them and you're like, how have you gone through your life and not peeled the fruit correctly? But they exist. It's okay. But you will have different grades of people who are efficient and not. And it's just a time allocation thing. And so the cooperative is a very good idea. It needs to be, we're getting closer to it coming to fruition, in my personal opinion. You had a question.
Yeah, it was related to, well, I don't know what exactly it was related to, but it was about pasteurization, because he was talking about getting your pulp tested.
Yes.
Has anybody ever pasteurized pulp?
So Dr. Brannon actually did some pasteurization tests with high pressure pasteurization. They didn't come out very conclusive. He wanted to do a second year and was not able to do a second year. But there is potential. There's also a new piece of equipment that puts electricity through it, if I remember correctly. My brother, I was talking to a food scientist at a family gathering and I didn't understand it completely. But so there is new technology out there that could possibly help this. But you need to be able to you need to show sterility, because something that comes up with the brewing very often is that batches go bad because the pawpaw pulp does have yeast in it. And we actually did see, Dr. Scheenens and I did a test this year looking at the microbial makeup of pawpaw pulp when you just squish it with the skin, when you sanitize it, and we used a sanitization that they use for apples, which is a hydrogen peroxide sanitizer, a very low concentration of it. We just dunked all the fruit in it for 2 minutes, and then we washed it twice and we pulled them all out, and that's killed off the yeast completely. So it could be as easy as that. Dr. Scheenens knows the name of that if you want to talk to him. He's the one that looks like a wizard out. Yes.
I haven't read anything lately about irradiated fruit. They used to do that with strawberries quite a bit. What do you know about the state of that art, and could it be applicable?
I know that they radiate mangosteens when they come over from the Southeast Asia. So I know that they're still doing that because they had to. Mangosteens are just have been allowed into the States because they had to irradiate them for some virus that they didn't want to come into the U.S. So.
But that's not for edible purposes.
Yeah, it's for edible.
The seeds are?
Yeah, all of it's irradiated.
Oh, the whole fruit.
The whole fruit is irradiated
For eating.
for eating. Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
What about ozone sterilization?
That.
You can buy an ozone generator for $1.
You have to make sure it's all food grade. That's all that. And so when you're adding anything chemical into it, you're going to change the flavor. So you're going to have to run a taste panel like we did to taste the difference between something that's ozonified and not. And when we were finding that bitter taste from this machine, we tasted it before it went into the machine and after, and we're like, okay, definitely coming from the machine. It's not happening beforehand. So you have to do that elimination process, that make a hypothesis, where is it coming from? If it's coming from here, it will taste this way, and test it methodically.
Well, does peroxide affect the flavor?
Peroxide would decrease, it would interact with some of the flavor compounds, which is one of the big selling points of Pawpaw. I don't know exactly how it would react, but it would react. Okay guys, we've got to, unless it's starting to rain, nope it's not, we're going to walk to the orchard and we're going to talk about pollination.